Finally, then is the topic of disasters and preventing disasters from happening. It will happen, I'm sure that your Galera cluster, at some stage, perhaps sometime, will fail. And I think it's good to be prepared for that to happen. That could be because of software bugs. It can be because of that someone is doing a network or a router upgrade, which you are not in control over, causing and while doing the upgrade, perhaps blocking different Galera ports, or that some main central switch is updated, which is causing an RST to be calculated, which is then basically very heavy for the rest of the network, and then causing timeouts, Galera nodes then disconnecting from each other. There are many things that can happen. Or that if you're running in Amazon, for example, that an availability zone goes down, Galera then propagates further to regions, and then you can have a big problem too. It can also be that your schema upgrades or any upgrade that you're doing is going severely wrong, right? And things are happening that you didn't expect. It can also be that you're getting a connection store for whatever reason to your database service, like a denial of service attack, for example. Or a software bug that is caused by the upgrade that is, like the things that we're talking about in the schema upgrade section earlier. And one way then is to add an asynchronous slave to the Galera cluster. And if the cluster would fail, you could fail over to this asynchronous slave instead, and it could then handle application work until the cluster has been recovered. And there's a couple of benefits here, really, and one of them is that the asynchronously replicated slave is that it's completely decoupled from the cluster. Right? In the Galera cluster, you have one sort of replication protocol, and between the Galera cluster into the asynchronous slave, there's an asynchronous replication protocol, which is different, right? A protocol bug, for example, in Galera cannot propagate over to the asynchronous replication link, which is, then making the asynchronous slave being a bit of an isolated island in some sense. And it's also then, of course, possible to have this asynchronous slave put in some other region, in some totally other data center. For example, you're heavily in Amazon AWS, but you perhaps would like to have the async slave in a rack space, at rack space, for example. And you're familiar with normal MySQL master-slave replication, I'm pretty sure, and you know from there that if the master MySQL server crashes, then you are not sure that all data from the master has been replicated to the slave. So you're risking basically data loss if the master crashes. But the good thing here is that you can set up one or more of the Galera nodes to be replication masters. And you can also set up semi-sync replication between the Galera node and the replication, the asynchronous slave, the replication slave. Semi-sync means that when you're committing a transaction, it will be asynchronously replicated and put into the relay log of the slave, and then it will be acknowledged back to the client. But we do not know if it has been, applied in the on the database in the async slave. But we know the update or the write has at least reached the asynchronous slave at commit time which is quite nice, because then we know that we have really all the data into different regions, to different data centers, and to safe locations at least. And then if you're then using MySQL 5.6 or MariaDB 10.0, well, then you can use global transaction identifiers, which makes it really, really easy to make a failover, from a failed master to another master inside the Galera cluster. It's just basically to point the change master to the new master, and then just start the slave again, and it will pick up and figure out itself where it should. The slave will figure out itself where it should resume from without missing any data. And this is, yeah, I mean, so much easier than, if you remember, with checking the binary log files and binary log positions and that kind of craziness. And here are some examples on how you can set this, how you can configure this. I think it's important. It's very important that you set the log slave updates. So on the Galera replication masters, else they will not receive any writes then that are happening on another node will not be written into the binary log of this node. So you must set the log slave updates, and of course make sure that you have unique server IDs, etc. Then, since you have then enabled the binary logging on the MySQL servers, well, then it's very easy to make also point-in-time recovery, so that you can restore your last backup and then apply the increments, and then if you need to take the binary logs and roll forward until the last transaction, making that if the worst comes to the worst, then you will not lose any data. Then one of the problems as well to be able to protect from is to handle overload situations basically in the MySQL server. And it's quite common that a software bug in your perhaps application code or an upgrade, as I said, goes wrong, causing a lot of a connection flooding problem onto your MySQL servers, and you run out of connections. Really, no matter how high you set the max connections variable to, and maybe you set it to 5,000 or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. You don't need to set it really that high, I would say, because 5.5 scales up to, I think, 16 cores or 20 cores or something like that. 5.6 scales up to 40 cores, so it's improved the scalability there. But there's only so many concurrent connections the MySQL server can handle anyway. And then I think it's a good way to put an HA proxy between the application server and your Galera cluster. And you see the application server can fire in many connections to the HA proxy, but the HA proxy can limit the number of backend connections to the Galera cluster. So you're not risking, you're setting a limiter, so you cannot, you cannot overshoot this limit. So you're protecting your database cluster. And also, as I said, a server can only use so many cores, and then it's better to have a few concurrent threads operate in parallel than having X number of connection threads operating in parallel. It doesn't make the situation better. It's better actually to run fewer queries and they will complete faster, basically. So I think that's pretty much it, and now you are ready for production, basically. So I would like to thank you very much and hand the word over to you, JJ.
Yeah, thanks, Johan. Thanks for walking us through this, and thanks everyone for participating. Just before we let you go, we just wanted to run a quick poll and also see whether there are any questions we can answer. And this is really just to see what you are at in the audience in terms of going into production with Galera Cluster. So maybe today's session helped you with doing some planning for it, or maybe it gave you some tips on what to do if you're already in production. But it'd be great to just get your feedback here. And see where you are and see how we might be able to help you then with your plans in the future. And so we do have a few questions I saw. Some of them are actually quite specific. And we are a little bit over the time that we had allocated. So I don't think we'll be answering all of them, but we'll see if we can answer a couple. In any case, the session is recorded, so we'll make the replay available to you as soon as possible. And I'm just going to share the results of the survey. So it looks like most of you are currently evaluating, which is good. So hopefully you got some good insight today on what it would mean to go into production with Galera Cluster. And then another bigger portion of you are already in production. So hopefully you got some good tips today on things that you could still implement in your production systems. And we're here to help you anyway along the way if you have any questions on that. So I saw that there are some questions that are quite specific though. So I think just because we are already 10 minutes over the time, what we will do, we will answer all of your questions directly to you via email. So we'll contact you individually just to answer the questions that you had. So don't worry, you'll get answers to them, and we can discuss your questions even further if you like. But with that, I think I'd like to thank you all for participating today. If you need to contact us, my name is JJ. I'm reachable at jj@severalnines.com. And you can always find us online, of course, at severalnines.com as well.